Good morning, friends. I'm Dewey, and my Tech Talk topic for today is HDMI cables and ports demystified. At last Monday's Tech for Seniors meeting, Carl Kalenda posted a note in chat saying he would appreciate it if I would do a Tech Talk on HDMI and perhaps more specifically define the difference between HDMI 2.1 and HDMI 2.1a. Fellow TFSer Dick Vogel agreed with Carl's suggestion. Got a little dirty secret for you. Truth be told, I don't really know much about HDMI cables, ports, and standards. I don't know any more than most of you. The same goes for many of the tech talks I write. Surprise. My ace in the hole is having been a teacher for 36 years. I taught both band and orchestra and had a penchant for organization, study, and research, and I really enjoyed writing on the side as I had time. The acronym HDMI stands for High Definition Media Interface. High definition video and audio is digital. Digital replaced analog video and audio because it was simply much higher quality. An early HDMI logo is at the left, and a more recent HDMI Ultra HDR logo is at the right. The term media is broad enough to include every kind of device used to transmit digital video and audio, like cables, ports on TVs, computers, DVD players, and so forth. The term interface, as used here, simply means connector or connection. A Google search revealed that HDMI was developed cooperatively by 7 companies, including Sony, Hitachi, Philips, and the parent companies of RCA and Panasonic. HDMI 1.0 was released on December 9th, 2022, and was based on standards for a single cable which would transmit both digital audio and video and had a reliable connector interface. The first significant improvement was HDMI 1.4. Released in 2009, it was designed to transmit 4K video up to 24 frames per second. Minor revisions 1.4a and 1.4b followed. HDMI 2.0 was released in 2013. HDMI 2.0a in 2015 and HDMI 2.0b in 2016, which increased the bandwidth from 10.2 gigabits per second to 18 gigabits per second. HDMI 2.0b was a significant upgrade. It supported 4K video at 60 frames per second in all forms of high dynamic range and set foundational standards for the upcoming 8K resolution TVs. HDMI 2.1 launched in 2018. Now that's new, 2.1. Launched in 2018 and supports frame rates to 120 frames per second, doubled it, and 4K and 8K video to a maximum bandwidth of 48 gigabits per second. HDMI 2.1 cables are also known now as HDMI Ultra High Speed. Note the logo to the right, and those are the cables you need to buy. Don't ever buy anything less than that. Please note that these improvements that we've talked about have seen HDMI cable bandwidth increase from a starting 5 gigabits per second out to 48 gigabits per second. Note the graphic displaying the changes. And also it increased frame rates from 24 frames per second to 120 frames per second. It's amazing progress. I need to mention that talk about HDMI 𝐴𝐅𝐶. It's an HDMI port on TVs since the 2009 launch of HDMI 1.4. The HDMI audio return channel 𝐴𝐅𝐶 port connects your TV and audio system using a single high-speed HDMI cable. Now, one clarification here. Remember, HDMI ports on your TVs are essentially inputs, but the audio return channel outputs on the same cable an audio signal to your external devices like your audio system or soundbar. This eliminates the need for an additional composite audio or optical audio cable to send this high-quality audio to a soundbar or AV receiver. The 2018 launch of HDMI 2.1 included a significant upgrade to enhanced ARC, known as 𝐂𝐴RC. Since HDMI 2.1 has a higher bandwidth than HDMI 1.4, it can transport the original audio signal through an HDMI cable and reproduce it with the best sound possible without any compromise. Now that I've pretty much brought you up to speed on 2.1, it's time to get back to the original query about the difference between HDMI 2.1 and HDMI 2.1a. That's what this talk was supposed to be all about. A February 8th, 2022 article by Simon Cohen in digitaltrends.com offered a wealth of information about HDMI 2.1a, including this introductory statement. Listen on. The first thing you should know about HDMI 2.1a is that you probably don't need it. As a minor update to the HDMI 2.1 specification, it only introduces one new feature, source-based tone mapping, and it's called SBTM. He went on to say that unless you're a gamer looking for the ultimate in HDR performance, or a PCR user who routinely works with a combination of standard dynamic range and high dynamic range content, you can safely ignore the HDMI 2.1a standard for a long time to come. A significant portion of Simon Cohen's February 8th article was devoted to a detailed explanation of SBTM. I'd suggest that anyone interested find Simon Cohen's article, which is called HDMI 2.1a is on its way. Here's what you need to know. If you're wondering if HDMI 2.1a is available now, the answer is simply no. For starters, manufacturers haven't even yet declared support for SBTM, which is the primary thing different about 2.1a. The HDMI Forum is a group that guides and develops new HDMI standards, and it plans to release the HDMI 2.1a standard by the end of this month of March. But we probably won't see new products touting SBTM until 2023. To take advantage of SBTM, all of your media devices will need to be upgraded to HDMI 2.1a. This includes gaming consoles, streaming media devices, TVs, AV receivers, soundbars, and so forth. Fortunately, many devices, sources, and displays sold in recent years will be firmware updatable, in order to support the HDMI 2.1a standard. However, there's no real guarantee that even if your TV is physically capable of handling 2.1a, that your manufacturer will indeed issue an update. You just don't know. Also, it's unlikely that you'll ever need to replace your existing HDMI cables for SBTM or 2.1a. SBTM uses extended display identification data signaling to communicate a display's capability to a connected source device. EDID has been a part of the HDMI specification from the beginning, from HDMI 1.0. The HDMI licensing administrator, which oversees the way HDMI capable products are marketed, has a clear rule that manufacturers of products like TVs, DVD players, streaming devices are obligated to list the specific HDMI features they support. Now, for example, this would include in HDMI 2.1 things like 𝐂𝐴RC, variable refresh rate, and 4K video at 120 hertz. If you're talking about HDMI 2.1a, of course, it would include SBTM. Well, that's my Tech Talk story for today, and I'm sticking with it. good Lord knows I sure ventured out into the weeds toward the end on this one. Well, anyway, thanks for watching. Stay safe. And the good Lord willing, we'll be seeing you next week. I want to mention also that we're just rounding out the end of our wintering here at our little tin shack with lean-to at Silveridge in Mesa, Arizona. And if things get too busy, I might have to not be here for a week. Well, anyway, see you later.
Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Many times I go to help a neighbor, a friend, or a member of my user group with a new computer, a new printer, or they are just needing some help. One of the first things I have to do is sign on to their Wi-Fi with my computer, with my phone, or in the case of new equipment, with their hardware. One of the first questions I ask is, what is your Wi-Fi password? And I get a blank stare. And I look at the face of the person and I see panic. Then they start shuffling through papers or through a notebook or through card, and they find either no password or they find a whole bunch of them, and they don't know which one is the actual one. So let's look at some ways in which you might be able to get the password for them and alleviate that panic. The first place to look is on the router itself. That might require you getting on your hands and knees underneath the desk or somewhere in the room in a dust-filled area and find the router. And then either on the top or the side or the bottom, there may be a label with the password. If you're lucky, that password wasn't changed and you have determined what the password is. To view the password of a currently connected network in Windows 11, or in Windows 10, as a matter of fact, you can do it the same way. What we're going to do is we're going to open up our settings. There are several ways in which you can get to your settings. You can do it from your toolbar. You can do it from your start button. And then go to settings. And then what you want to do is you want to go to network and internet. You want to go to advanced network settings. More network adapter options. You go to the Wi-Fi and right mouse click and go to status. If status is not bold, that means the Wi-Fi is not on. But if the status is there, you click it, you'll get this window and go to wireless property. Then you go to the security tab, and you'll see the network security key is here, little dots. If you click on show characters, it will then show the password for your network. If you want to access the password of other Wi-Fi networks that are saved on your device, you can do that too on Windows 11 or on Windows 10. The operating system keeps the network security keys of every Wi-Fi network you get connected to. However, unlike the previous method, there is no straightforward way to view these passwords. You will have to use some commands on the command prompt window. Let's see how to do that. What you first have to do is go to your command prompt. The best way to do it is open your start button, click, and type in command prompt. You'll see it here. You're going to right mouse click because you do have to run it as administrator. You're going to want to allow it, and you have your command prompt as administrator available for you. You need to copy and paste or type the following command to view all of the saved networks. That's what you need to copy. When you press enter, it will give you a list of all the user profiles on that particular computer. This is my desktop, and it's wired most of the time, so it does not save many wireless networks, and it's not moved, so there are not many available. Next, what you do is you take one of the ones that you want to find the password for, and you're going to copy and paste using the information that you find with this line. You'll see all of the information. You substitute whatever the user profile that you wish to have in this area, but everything else would be the same. When I click that, I press enter, it gives me the key content, and that is the password. That's it. You can copy or write down the Wi-Fi password and use or share it with others as needed. Let me show you an example from my laptop. From a long list of user profiles, I'm choosing 𝐓𝐅𝐻𝐒. I substitute 𝐓𝐅𝐻𝐒 in the line, paste it, and get a key content. If you find it difficult to follow the steps to reveal your Wi-Fi password, or if you frequently need to view the password of your Wi-Fi network, then there's a third-party application that will show you the network key without any hassle. The Wireless Key View from Nearsoft helps you in accessing the Wi-Fi password that you have forgotten or lost. You can access all of the SSID and their network security keys saved on your device. The user interface of the application is a bit old, but it will still work for you. Here's how to use it. Go to the website that I have here. You will find the Wireless Key View. The current version, as I'm making this video, is version 2.22. And what you want to do is go all the way to the bottom of the page. And you will find you can download, and I downloaded the Wireless Key View for x64. Make sure you make note of the zip file password because you'll need that to unzip the file. Once you download and unzip the file, you will find the wireless 𝐓𝐼𝑍.exe file, and you just click it. It's going to ask you to allow it. Once you do, let's bring this here, you will see the same network names and the keys for those on here. You can run this at any time. You do not have to install it. Just remember where that app is located, or make a shortcut on your desktop for wireless 𝐓𝐼𝑍.exe. Wi-Fi passwords can be a valuable asset, so it's important to take the necessary steps to protect them. Now that you know how to view your Wi-Fi password in Windows, it's also important to learn how to manage and protect it. Here are a few tips to help you manage your Wi-Fi password. Change the default SSID and password immediately after getting a new Wi-Fi connection. Never share your password with anyone unless you trust them completely. Make sure the password is strong and consists of letters, numbers, and special characters. Update your passwords regularly to reduce the chance of unauthorized access. Always check how many devices are connected to your Wi-Fi network to know who is on your Wi-Fi. For that, you need to check the dashboard of your router. Now, those tips are good ones. Most of us don't adhere to them. I've shown you how to view Wi-Fi passwords in Windows in 4 ways. The first method is to check your router for a label which contains the Wi-Fi password. In the second method, I showed you how to view the password of currently connected networks using advanced Wi-Fi settings. With this method, there is no need for any command line or administrator rights. You can just open Windows settings, follow a few instructions, and get your network security key. In the third method, I showed you how to view passwords of all Wi-Fi networks that are saved on your system. This method uses the command prompt window and some commands. It's also straightforward to follow. The fourth method is to run a third-party application. How to see your Wi-Fi password in Windows. I'm Hewie Poplock.
It's Ron Brown with Tech for Seniors and another tutorial. Why is my internet so slow? Can it be my hardware? Now you remember the routine. If you like this video, please click the like, and if you want to promote the channel and help us, please subscribe. What is a modem, and does it affect speed? Well, your modem is used to change the signal from a transmission signal to a signal your computer is going to use. So basically it converts the type of signal that you have. Now there are different types of modems for each type of signal that you have or may have. For example, the modem is specific to DSL. If you have a DSL signal, then you'll have a DSL modem. If you have a cable signal coming in, then you'll have a cable modem. And if you have a fiber optic modem, you'll have a fiber optic, if you have a fiber optic signal, then you'll have a fiber optic modem. So each type of service you have requires a specific modem, and you can't swap them around. So if you have one, you have to use it with that specific service. Modems are almost always provided by your ISP. Oh, I'm sorry, ISP is Internet Service Provider. So they're almost always provided by your ISP. Now, sort of one size fits all. Now, that's not exactly true. I've had 3 upgrades to my cable service this year, and in each time I required a different modem to give me different speeds. So your provider may give you a different modem depending on what speed you want. Now, the other thing about cable modems is it's interesting that we have upload and download speed. And have you ever wondered why in a fiber optic connection you might have 150 megabytes down and 150 up? It's equal. Down and up is equal. But why, when we have cable modems, is it always so much slower going up? In other words, we have 150, 200 download, but we only have 10 going up. And that's because of the software called DOCSIS 3.1 that actually is used in cable modems to transmit the signal. This is not something you can upgrade or change. This is what the cable companies use to transmit the signal. And this is going to change over time as this software improves and changes. But right now, you'll find a big difference in upload and download speed with your cable modem. Most ISPs will provide you with a modem. It's always better to purchase a modem rather than renting it, because you're going to pay rental costs over a number of years. The modems are not that expensive. However, most recently, ISPs usually will charge you a rental fee, and it's harder to purchase a modem. Now, a lot of the modems that are provided by ISPs now are a combination modem and router. This is not a worrisome thing, because you can always bridge the modem to your own router if you want, but we're going to talk about this a little bit later. I should tell you about a recent federal law. This was called the TVPA, or the Television Viewer Protection Act. This was passed in 2019. And what this says is this: it requires the cable companies to negotiate agreements in good faith. Provides more transparency in your cable bill, so you should know what you're paying for. But here's the kicker: it bans companies for charging extra fees when you use your own equipment. So if you purchased your cable modem, or the modem you have, many years ago, why can't you continue to use it? This, of course, is a big controversy right now. The ISPs generally are charging you an administration fee or a maintenance fee or some sort of fee surrounding your modem, even if you do own it. There seems to be little incentive to actually put teeth in this legislation. So you can fight that out as you see fit, but most likely you'll be paying some sort of maintenance fee for this combination modem router. Well, what is a router, and can it affect speed? There are 3 main functions of a router. Now, most of you associate your router with creating a Wi-Fi signal, but the primary and most important thing about a router is to protect you. It is your first firewall safeguard against the bad guys coming in through the internet. That is why it's so important that you keep the software or firmware updated. The second function of a router is producing a Wi-Fi signal, and that's probably what most of you associate it with. And the third thing, of course, is routing or connecting all your peripheral devices and Internet of Things. It assigns a specific ID number. Now, there are two things you need to do with your router to maintain fast speeds. And the first thing is update your firmware. This is so important. And most routers don't normally update automatically unless you have what we call a mesh router, and we'll be talking a little bit about that later. Now, also, it's important to remember is if you want fast internet, don't use Wi-Fi. Plug your router directly into your computer. Get an Ethernet cable and plug it right in. Some of the biggest mistakes I see is when people have their router sitting right next to their computer and they're using Wi-Fi. Everything we say in the last half of this video will all go away if you just plug in your computer directly to your router and not use Wi-Fi. Now, to log into your router is different for each type of router, but generally speaking, you'll put the IP address of your router in your search box and it will bring up your router, such as this example with D-Link. You'll then need to go to the administration section and put your password in. You probably don't know what the password is. Most of the time it's admin. Usually the password will be, the generic default password will be in your instruction manual. Once you put this in, you'll log into your router and it will be very easy. Usually you'll get a message like this saying update firmware. Click on that and you simply update the firmware in your router. Very simple to do. Please make sure, for optimum speed, make sure that your software in your router is updated. Now, if you have a router that's over 5 years old, time to get a new one. Lots of big changes occurred over the past 5 years. Now, in the bottom slide here, I have a picture of a router that's currently offered on Amazon. Now, the thing that's so important when you purchase a router is that you get one that's made this year so that you get a modern, up-to-date one with the current software. When you buy a router on Amazon, unless you know specifically what you're purchasing, you could be getting a 5-year-old router or more. Even though it's a new router and it's offered on Amazon, it's still a very bad deal because of the age. So I tend to recommend you buy a router from Best Buy who has current stock and you're assured to get something that's a current model. Should you use a combination router that is provided by your ISP? Well, that's really sort of a complex question and difficult to answer. In general, the routers that I've seen that are combination routers are very average routers, but that's not always the case. For example, my cable provider this year provided me with 3 different modem router combinations. In all cases, I switched to my 𝐓𝐅𝐒, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I had it bridged over to my own system. But in the last one that they came and provided, it was a very advanced router and even more advanced than the one that I have. So it really depends on your specific provider and what the capabilities of this hardware they're putting in. So I can't give you a specific recommendation on that other than say it's generally most now what I'm seeing is that combination modem routers are being the ones that are offered to you. So ask your ISP for recommendation. Now, the second thing that's important to know is that if you do have a router and you think the router is one that you want to use, it's your own and you like it, then you can bridge it to the existing combination modem router. So you can use your own. Even though you have a combination modem router that the ISP has given you, you can still use your own. Now, you can't just connect it. It needs to be bridged. Now, what does bridging mean? Well, this is where your ISP has to make some changes in the software, and this is usually done through their central computer system, and allows you to bridge your own modem, bridge your own router to the, so why don't they just let you plug your router into the modem? Well, that would be a little bit sneaky, because then people could simply take their neighbor and take their router and plug it into their system, and their neighbor then could take another neighbor and plug it into their system, and pretty soon on one service connection you could be running a small network. And this is sort of frowned upon by the ISPs. So that's why they're really careful, and in most cases they only allow one router to be connected per service. So that's why you have to have it bridged, and the company needs to do that. You should have a dual band router. If you purchased a router in the last 5 years, then you probably have a dual band router. Now, what do I mean by a dual band? Well, it broadcasts on 2 different frequencies. It uses a 2.4 gigahertz frequency and a 5 gigahertz frequency. So there's 2 frequencies that can broadcast your Wi-Fi on. Now, there's no relationship to 5G. When I talk about 5 gigahertz, I'm talking about a frequency, nothing to do with 5G. Now, you need to know how Wi-Fi signals work. If I have a router at my house and you have a router next door at your house, and our Wi-Fi signals are broadcasting, there's obviously going to be some collision. The problem that happens is this: if my signal's going out and it's going by your house, or there's a signal coming in and the two collide, my signal says to your signal, "Oh, excuse me," and your signal says, "Excuse me." "Oh, you go." "No, I'll go." "Okay, I'll go." So signals are very polite, but this leads to congestion, because the more collisions you have between different modems, the slower your systems will get. This becomes a huge problem with signal strength. If you have a router that you've bought and it's a very powerful router and you're using it for a big house, let's say a 4,000 square foot house, and then you move into a condo, a place where you have a very tiny area to live, and on that particular floor, maybe your condo floor, you have maybe 10 suites, and they all have routers in them. But if you've brought your bad boy router, as we call it, and bring it into your condo, then the signal strength is going to blast across the whole floor, and all those people, it's going to lead to congestion, and it's going to lead to collision amongst these radio waves, and this is going to slow everybody's signal down. So that may be an option when you, if you live in a populated condo or apartment, and all of a sudden you notice a degradation in your signal. It could be someone that's brought a bad boy router up and plugged it in, and it's giving a lot of congestion traffic. So that's one of the problems that you may have. Now let's talk about, there's 2 signals. There's the 2.4 gigahertz signal. This is the most commonly used with routers, Internet of Things, hubs, and security cameras. They usually broadcast on the 2.4 gigahertz. It gets fairly good penetration, so it goes through walls, goes through glass, and certainly even people, right? So this is why it's always been used. This is the original Wi-Fi signal, was 2.4 gigahertz. The problem, of course, is since everybody's broadcasting on that one signal, it can lead with a lot of congestion and slowing of traffic. The second broadcast signal is on the 5 gigahertz. And this should really be your choice when you're choosing between the two, and we'll talk about how to do that in a minute. You should be broadcasting on or receiving on 5 gigahertz. And why is that important? Well, there's less problems with congestion, and it also is much faster. Being a higher frequency, it actually is a much faster signal. However, the problem with it is that it doesn't penetrate walls, glass, and it's usually limited to one room. Now, this is a great advantage if you're in a congested area such as a condo. If you have a lot of Wi-Fi around you and you're receiving on your 5 gigahertz signal from your router, then that means that you're probably going to not get that much congestion because this signal doesn't go outside your room. So this is the signal you should be using on a dual band router. Now, let's look at the two signals that you'll have coming from your router. Now, your SSD, well, your SSD is a unique name that is associated with your router. Now, it might be Netgear 345 or whatever you've named it. Now, in this example I've given you, you'll see that this is called Home 6595. So if you look on your Wi-Fi settings, you'll see that the red arrow points to 2.4. Now, when you're connected, then you would be connected to the slower 2.4 gigahertz. But also, if you look on your network settings for Wi-Fi, you'll also see that the same SSID has a 5 next to it. And this is the same router broadcasting in two different frequencies. One is 2.4 and one is 5. In the example here, the person is connected to the 2.4. To connect to the 5, you would simply move your cursor down and click on the Home 6595-5, and then you would be connected to the 5 gigahertz frequency. So what I want you to do is next time you're at your computer, look at your Wi-Fi settings, look down the list, and I bet you'll find that there's 2 broadcasting frequencies for your SSID. Have a look. And then let's choose the 5 gigahertz because it's going to be faster. Now, what happens if you don't see a 5 gigahertz? Well, there's a number of reasons for that, but there's primarily 3. First of all, you may not have a dual band router, so possibility. The second thing is that your 5 gigahertz band, 5 gigahertz frequency may need to be turned on in your router. Most routers that you purchase come with the 5 gigahertz turned on. Part of the reason I think is that most people don't know how to log into their router, so that would cause a huge amount of support calls to the router makers if it wasn't automatically turned on. So most of the time I see with modern routers that you purchase today, the 5 gigahertz will be turned on. So you should see it. Now, if you have a dual band router and it is turned on and you still don't see the 5 gigahertz signal, then it could be that your laptop is very old and doesn't have the 5 gigahertz receiver in it. So in the diagram I've shown here, I've just shown you the router settings, and usually it's just a toggle switch to turn on the 5 gigahertz if you need to switch it on. Now, not to worry, if you have an older laptop and you don't have a 5 gigahertz receiver in there, you can easily add one very cheaply. And this is a USB dual band adapter. This was $22.95 on Amazon. And you can just plug this into the USB port and it will give you you'll be able to receive a 5 gigahertz signal. These are readily available and not expensive. Now, do all routers broadcast equally? Well, no. Some are more powerful than others, and you can just imagine this particular router and look at all the aerials in it. Amazing. This is a bad boy router. This is a very powerful router, and one that you might consider if you have a very large house. But certainly inconsiderate if you live in a one-bedroom apartment and there's lots of apartments around you. Because if you're going to use this router, then in fact you're going to be broadcasting a lot of signals and causing a lot of congestion, which again, as we've discussed, is going to slow the system down for everybody. Another reason, by the way, to make sure you don't use Wi-Fi, because if you plug into your router, then this of course will not be a problem. Let's talk a little bit about Wi-Fi extenders. We also call these boosters. These are very popular. Many of you always ask me, should I get an extender to help with poor coverage in an area of my house? Now, the Wi-Fi extender extends the range of a Wi-Fi wireless signal from a Wi-Fi router. So it's going to take your existing signal and it's going to extend the range of it. But that's with a cost. So it acts like a bridge between your Wi-Fi router and the Wi-Fi device that you want to connect. So if you have a computer in 2 or 3 rooms over and you can't connect to it, then what it will do is it will take the signal, it will rebroadcast it, and connect it in the other room, the 3 rooms over. So it's using your existing network. And it acts sort of like a wireless access point for your devices to connect to. So it actually has a unique SSID. So it's going to you're going to have your initial router, which has an SSID. It's going to broadcast to this device. This device it's like a second router. It will receive the signal, and then it will have its own SSID, and then it will broadcast to the next device that you want. Now, there's a cost to this, and here's in this diagram, I've showed you exactly how this is going to work. Each time you run your signal through an extender or booster, you're going to reduce the speed by 50%. And the reason for that is because it's the law of physics, is that the signal has to come to one device to the other device, and then it's going to be rebroadcast again to the next device. So you're going to find that the signal will get reduced. So you do not want to use Wi-Fi extenders in combination, or things are going to get very slow. Now, this is exactly opposite to mesh routers. An example of a mesh router is above that, and you'll see there's no loss of signal. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Now, one of the things you should do if you have poor areas of signal in your house is you might want to consider a power line adapter. We can actually send your Wi-Fi signal down the electrical grid in your house. It actually works on your 110 volt wiring. So in this situation, you'll see that your router is connected to a device that's plugged in to an electrical outlet. 3 rooms down where you want to connect your device, you simply plug another device into the electrical outlet, and you can either plug that into the computer or it will broadcast a Wi-Fi signal for you. And so you can actually run a network in your house on your existing electrical wiring that you have in all your rooms. The one thing that it won't do, though, is if you have a circuit breaker panel, it won't cross the circuit breaker panel. So, for example, suppose you had in your house, you had an existing panel, and then you maybe had another office in another building or garage, then it wouldn't be able to go out. There would be another electrical panel with circuit breakers that wouldn't cross that. So there are some limitations, but these are commonly used They're quite inexpensive. As the example I've given you, the one here is about $74.99 for 2 of them. And this will effectively make it quite easy to get signals to all parts of your house. Now, for large homes, you should consider a mesh router. I have a mesh router. I use a system called the 𝐓𝐅𝐒. It's made by Netgear. These are adaptable to any size of your house. They are purchased by the square footage of your coverage you want. We'll talk a bit about that in a minute. The firmware is done automatically. There's no loss of speed with nodes. And there's a single SSD for the entire house. And we'll talk a bit about that as well. And they broadcast in 2.4 and 2. We are going to take this mesh router system and put it in a 3-story house. The base station will go on the first floor, the first satellite will go on the second floor, and the second satellite on the third floor. Let's have a look and see how this is going to look. Here's our 3-story house. On the third floor we have kids playing 4K games. On the second floor we have Mom, who's a teacher, doing a Zoom conference. On the first floor we have Dad checking email. If we look at the bandwidth requirements, I've allocated this as roughly 60, 30, and 10 as a distribution. If we look at internet speed, if we look at the speed of how you would be allocating this frequency in this, you'll see on the left side, you'll see with an extender, as we move up, it would certainly be a decreasing speed. With the mesh system, it's the same. What the mesh system does do, though, is it reallocates the bandwidth and will selectively make the bandwidth higher priority for the 2 kids playing 4K video games with their televisions. Now let's look at things change. The kids go to sleep, and now we have Mom, who's doing the conference, and Dad checking email. There is a reallocation of bandwidth. And again, I've split it about 80-20. And this is exactly what the mesh router would reallocate to allow the effective use of the system. This is a big advantage of a mesh router system. All right, how does the mesh router system adjust the workflow to the demand? This is done through what we call a backhaul channel. So for example, with my 𝐓𝐅𝐒, I have a 2.4 gigahertz frequency, but I have 2 5 gigahertz frequencies. So it uses one of the 5 gigahertz frequencies to fill and move the data to points in the system that require it. Now a little trick is that if you do have a mesh router system, you have a number of satellite units in your house, and you're using it wirelessly, but you also can connect that to a wired internet connection in your house, you should do so. Because then the backhaul channel can actually be a wired connection. It doesn't have to be wireless. And that means you just plug it into the back of your mesh router. So that is one of the huge advantages in a mesh router system, is the good coverage and the selective movement of workflow data that you need depending on what the demand is at that time. So you might want to give it a consideration. Now I wanted to review the USB ports on your computer. This is important and a place where you can make a big mistake. In this current slide, you'll see my laptop. I have an IBM ThinkPad, and you'll see on the side, you'll see it has a HDMI port, but it has 2 USB ports. Now on the other side, which you can't see, there's 1 USB port, so I have 3 USB ports on this laptop. The important thing that you need to know is that all USB ports are not the same. And I have a docking station that I plug into one of my USB ports. This docking station has all my monitors coming into it, it has my internet coming in, and this all connects into one of my USB ports. Well, on the right side of my computer, on the laptop, is a USB 2 port. The 2 on the left side of my computer are USB 3.1. Now what's the difference? Well, there's a big difference, and in the diagram here you'll see some different types of USB ports. Now I have a whole series of 15 slides on the numbering nomenclature for USB ports. You don't want to see it, you'll never remember it. It's really complicated, and the little symbols are so small it's really hard to see them. But there actually is a labeling system you can use for this. The easiest way to do it is simply to get your instruction manual for your computer and look, and it will tell you what the ports are on your computer because it depends on what you want to plug in. For example, if you have a mouse, you would want to plug it in, if you're using it as a wired connection, into USB 2. It doesn't use much power, it doesn't need to be fast, but if you had an external hard drive, you want to plug it into your fast port. Now this gets more complicated if you have, I just bought a new computer from Dell. It has 12 USB ports. It has a Thunderbolt port, it has 4 ports on the front and 8 ports on the back, USB ports. So you need to know what those ports are because it can save you a lot of money. For example, let's talk about USB Thunderbolt 3. Now, most of you won't have a Thunderbolt 3 port. This is sort of unusual on a laptop, but I do have a Thunderbolt 3 on my main computer I just bought. And it is the fastest data transfer on USB, and it's 40 gigabytes per second. So it's an extremely fast transfer. So if you had a Thunderbolt USB port on your computer and you wanted to buy a Thunderbolt drive, for example, you connect them to, you have a very, very, very fast system. But most people won't have Thunderbolt 3, but you will have USB 3.1, and the transfer of USB 3.1 is 5 gigabits per second. But now, sneaky coming up here, there's a new standard coming out, and it's 3.1 generation 2, and that is 10 gigabits per second. Well, what's the difference? Big deal. USB 3.1, that's both there, but one's generation 1 and one's generation 2. Well, I just bought a 2 terabyte hard drive, an SSD external hard drive, and in the options I had the choice of choosing between 2 different models, and there was about $150 difference between the 2 models, and it was based on transfer speed. And because my laptop is limited to the 3.1 generation 1 at 5 gigabits per second, it would have been no use whatsoever to spend the extra $150 to buy the more expensive solid state drive. So again, you need to know what ports you're using and what the labeling of the ports is for sure, because they're not all equal, and you want to be careful what you plug in, because you don't want to be plugging your fast SSD external hard drive into your slowest port. So please have a look at that, check your manual, and review the USB ports on your computer. All right, in closing, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Wi-Fi 6. This is a new standard that you'll be seeing available on routers when you go to Best Buy and buy them. So should you purchase Wi-Fi 6 or not? Well, for sure it is going to be more expensive, but there is something I want you to consider. As we move ahead, you'll find that the speed at which we are receiving internet signal is going up considerably. And you all understand that. In fact, it's quite common now to be able to get a gigabit service to your house. A lot of what we do in our homes requires Wi-Fi, and we're transferring data back and forth. And you all understand, of course, that to transfer data faster, Wi-Fi has to be better, because it could be the slowest part of your system, and so you wouldn't be able to get benefit from a very fast internet supply. And I think you all understand that. So yes, we have to move ahead with Wi-Fi so that we're able to transmit faster speeds. One of the things that's important that's a change between Wi-Fi 5 and Wi-Fi 6 is simply this. In this video, I pointed out all the benefits of 5 gigahertz, right? Remember that? It's in a smaller room, it's less interference, and we already discussed that. and we discussed the problems of network congestion on the 2.4 gigahertz. What Wi-Fi 6 does, Wi-Fi 5 only was involved in the 5 gigahertz. But Wi-Fi 6 now is taking the 2.4 gigahertz, the slower speed that we talked about, and it's dramatically increasing the speed of 2.4 gigahertz. So the beauty of 2.4 gigahertz is it goes much farther. But we always wanted to use the 5 because it's much faster. But with Wi-Fi 6, this is all changing, and this is going to have a big effect on the speed of your system. So I think even though, yes, everything is going to have to convert to Wi-Fi 6. It'll be backwards compatible. Yes, your computer will have to have Wi-Fi 6 in it. Your Internet of Things devices will have to have Wi-Fi 6. And of course, your router will have to be a Wi-Fi 6 enabled. But this is a standard that's going to quickly transform into most of the routers that we purchase. They are more expensive. If you go to buy an Orbi system now that have Wi-Fi 6 in it, you're going to be paying about $150 more. I do think, though, that this is quickly going to change, and this is going to be the standard with some pretty big advantages. So you might want to consider this in your purchase of your next router.